Hello, everyone. Welcome to Teravarna again, and we have Debra Shapiro once again here in her San Francisco studio. It's a beautiful house overlooking the San Francisco harbor, and I'm in her house here in the studio, and she's been painting for a long time now. And I'd like to introduce everyone to her work, and to see how she does all these magnificent paintings. So, hi, Debra. How are you?
Hi, Niladri. I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for flying here to talk to me. I'm so excited.
Sure. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Me too.
We've known each other for a long time. So, if you can please introduce yourself and just let us know what who you are and.
So, hi, I'm Debra Shapiro. I'm an artist in San Francisco, and I'm a mother of 2 boys who are now out of the home and making their own way in the world. So I have my own life and my artwork right now ahead of me. It's very exciting.
Okay, cool. So how long have you been painting, Debra?
I've been painting for almost 40 years now.
Okay, so that's when you moved here to San Francisco, right?
I moved here to pursue that. I started painting a little bit before I moved here, but I wasn't committed to it as my full life. But I would call myself a painter, probably a working painter with jobs and selling paintings, maybe for 30 years.
Okay, cool. And did you always want to be a painter?
I always wanted to be making things and working in art from the time I was small, but I didn't have a vision for how people did that. I mean, until it wasn't something that was frequently done in the area where I grew up in the Midwest. I didn't know anyone who made their living as a painter, and it really was when I visited museums and saw paintings and fell in love with what I was seeing, and I couldn't stop thinking about it and just knew that it was something I wanted to learn to do. But putting that together with the business and making a living doing it, that was a very vague idea of mine for a long time.
Yeah, that always remains vague, I think, because especially even these days artists, you never know how it's gonna
it's
cut,
vague.
right? Yeah, absolutely.
It can be.
So, would you consider yourself a self-taught artist, or?
A lot of my teaching or learning was self-taught originally, but when I moved to San Francisco, I took the leap to go to art school here, and then I also went to art school in Florence. I went to Italy to learn to paint the way the masters painted. I felt that that was something I wanted to learn to do before I could. I think you said this earlier. I had to learn the rules before I could break the rules.
Right.
And I didn't want to paint like the ancient painters. However, I was smitten with so many things about their process and the way their work looked.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like if you don't learn, how to paint, like I don't know how you really move forward. I mean, you can't just say that you splatter some paint and say that that's paint. I mean, that's probably art, but you don't know that, right? At this point, I mean, you need to know that that's art or not. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so what kind of medium do you usually do?
I paint in oil, and this was something that happened from when I went to Italy to learn to paint. I had some classes in San Francisco in watercolor, gouache, and I was still hoping to learn to paint in acrylic. And when I went to Italy, my Italian wasn't it wasn't great. It wasn't in existence at all in the beginning. And I remember saying acrylic, and I just had the flat no. It was like, no, we don't use acrylic paint. So I started painting in oil. My first painting lessons of actual painting were in oil, and I never went back. I love the medium.
Okay, so you still work on oil, and you don't like do watercolor or acrylic at all, right? Okay.
No.
And what about your I know you do a lot of the collages these days, right? So what? How do you do that?
Vellum with my palette when I'm painting my paintings. I also am making papers that I have the oil paint on the pieces of vellum that I end up using and cutting up to use a collage. So that's a more recent twist to my work.
Okay, and this thing about collage I find really interesting because, like a lot of people do a lot of, similar things, but this is very different. So, so why, I mean, first of all, why do you do it? I mean, is it because you like the style or?
It slows me down a bit. I have a tendency to paint beyond the place where the painting could have stopped. I'll use my phone and look back a few frames and say, I wish I hadn't gone that far. And then I have to repaint to get the freshness back in. And in a collage, it's a cut and it's down and it's more definitive. So it slows me down, and I also think that it's informing my next generation. The paintings that I'm doing now are more of a contemporary feeling to me because the collage has shown me how to simplify, mainly. That I don't need every nuanced tone in the shadow and the mid-tone and the light. I can simplify it with shapes with a collage.
Well, like geometric shapes roughly, or and then you don't need to be like a realist or obviously not a hyper realist, but you're not a realist, right? So these I see bear resemblance to a lot of impressionist. So that's another technique I think that kind of mimics. I would say, I don't know if that would be safe to interpret that way.
You can say it. I feel that when I learned to paint, the Impressionists were definitely an influence. I was a little bit obsessed with looking at artists in museums in France, and even the Macchiaioli in Italy at the time of the Impressionists. They were painting the light and the way that they saw it. So I think I was influenced by that in my early painting style. Okay. But I am hoping to go a little more in the abstract, and I think still realism, still representational work, but I think that the collage work is really helping me to simplify it and look at the bigger shapes more instead of every little color tone.
Okay, so I have a few questions on your, for instance, I see a lot of blue in your work. What kind of blue do you use? I mean, for oil.
So I use the whole batteries of blues from warm to cool. So I use greenish blues from turquoise to even a green, phthalo green. I will mix with a little bit of ultramarine. So when I'm doing water, this particular series in the room with me is pools and beaches from these weddings and parties in Colombia and in Los Angeles. So I have more blue in these than I would generally have in my work, but I use greens to the purpley.
I see purples too, a lot of purples.
The purplies when I'm adding some alizarin crimson into ultramarine blue.
Right, okay. And so can you I see a lot of party scenes in your paintings, and we've spoken about it before, but I want to give our viewers the chance to appreciate what you're doing here. So can you talk about what you are trying to do with the a lot of party scenes? I see a lot of celebrations, right? So
I really have drilled into the parties and celebrations since the pandemic. And I think that having the experience of not being at parties and celebrations made me realize when I could start going to them again how much they meant, and how when you look at all of the things in lifetime for me that are worth the hours that I spent painting and thinking about them and reliving, I would rather relive things like that than any other scenes that I can think of. So it is cross-cultural. It doesn't matter what culture or what place on the planet. People celebrate their weddings, their milestones, their birthdays, anniversaries, and I feel that that's the part of life that I want to amplify with my work and to deliver the feeling of connectedness and love, and I feel like we need it now more than ever.
Okay, and so this painting itself is like this is in Colombia, right? Cartagena.
This is in Colombia, and it's still in process because I work on things, sometimes put them aside and come back to them. Cool. But people traveled from a long distance to come together for their favorite friend's wedding, and I was there because an old friend of mine from years ago had a change in her life, in her marriage, and was looking for a +1. So she called me out of the blue because her daughter was in this wedding. And so it was such a beautiful event, and the groom and the bride asked if I would do some work for them later on from this wedding. So I feel like this is the backdrop that started it, and then the pandemic happened after that.
Okay.
And after the pandemic, I went to another lovely destination wedding in France. And again, I was immersed in these days-long events of people that had been friends for a lifetime, and all of their kids grew up together and they were friends. And I was experiencing that timing in my life with my own kids and their friends. So I think my emotions got the best of me as far as why am I painting anything but this? You know, in the time that I have to paint, I really want to try to get the feeling of what these events and celebrations and gatherings bring. And it isn't always the high notes. There's always a little sadness when you leave your family to go, be with your married life. I mean, it's just, there's always a little transition or little offshoots of people that are maybe having some kind of drama or feeling sad about it.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
it's just been an interesting ride to be going to events now and looking for the potential paintings that come from them. It's fun.
Yeah, and if I'm looking at the, like the faces, I love the emotions, like even like this, only 3 characters here, like 3 different kind of emotions, right? I mean, like I see how, well you've brought those out. I mean, that's really great. Like in complex scenarios too. Obviously, like I can see the emotions, and people engrossed in conversations, and some people like just satiated, like maybe after food or just enjoying themselves. I mean, I love the different emotions. Like each face can speak. I mean, you can look at each face, and each face would convey a different feeling. I think
Exactly.
it's really great that. What about the white that you use? I see a lot of negative space too, but especially in the party scenes, like white mattresses and then white umbrellas and like skies. I mean, do you?
Well, I like to have. First of all, it's just the brightness, and I like to have my scenarios. I really only work with outdoor landscape scenes. I like to be in the light, in the brightness, and I love to give the eye a little rest when you have a lot of faces and bodies and figurative things. I think that rest, but also the white for it just. For me, it shows the light.
Right.
And it shows the turn of the light in a way that...
So calm and serene, I think. Yeah, it kind of gives a peaceful thing too.
I'm always attracted to that in the same way that I tend to use groups of 3. And a lot of my works have 3 women, and I do think this came from my early art school where I was in Florence, and I was a little bit obsessed with Botticelli. And the 3 Graces, Raphael, and the 3 Graces, and different versions of, from mythology, the 3 women. And I feel like I wasn't aware that I was doing that until I saw that I had about 5 paintings that were about 3 women, 3 women, 3 women, or 3 young girls. Right. But I feel it's the same thing with, I like umbrellas, there are certain tropes that subconsciously I'm just drawn to and put in my work.
Okay, cool. Okay, that's right. And then you come back and you paint from your photographs that you've taken.
I take hundreds and hundreds of photos.
Okay, and then you choose.
Generally in life, and I don't always know. Sometimes, in fact, I think, that will be what I'll paint, and I'll paint something totally different. But I look through my photos a lot.
Do you mix 2 photos to make one? Like
quite often. Like you'll see the same players show up in like. That girl is that girl.
But would it be like this scene you capture, or could it be like this scene where there was like a scene with the people in the water and some people running towards the water? Like
It's
mix and match and everything. Okay, got
total
it.
mashup.
Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes I even mash up events. Like it isn't all editorial, and sometimes I mash up the people, and I also, while I'm painting, in the time that it takes, I will be reliving something sometimes of my own events and parties and celebrations, and I will get like a different take on the actual reference that I'm using. So it's very hard for me to literally follow it.
So none of these are like your replica of your photographs.
Not much. Like if I'm doing it for someone else, this one is actually more straight from the photo. This one came from an Instagram post of a friend, and he was here. He was one of my son's friends, and I was like, whoa, wait, what's that? And it's like I just fell in love with these girls relaxing, and it was so perfect. I couldn't have taken that one any better myself, but I do usually not find the exact staged moment that I can take, so I have to make a lot of things up.
Okay, cool.
And add it in.
So I see a lot of movement, like for instance, this one, like, like dynamic things happening, and that's what the other thing that I love about, like, so the ephemeral part of it, like, it's like transition as if like transient, right? Like sort of like life, I love it. So let me ask you, like, and for, I think all artists I've known, there's been like challenging times. What kind of challenging times have you faced, and how did you overcome that? Like for free art, from your art perspective.
Challenging times in my art.
Like where you couldn't either block, or you had some other things going on that you couldn't paint, or like you had to overcome that to paint again, or.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like where do I begin? Yes, I mean, this is the way I learn, and I think a lot of other artists learn, but a lot of times I have to make the mistake or have the hardship, and then I course correct. So that definitely happened a lot in a lot of ways. And when I started painting figures, in fact, I had been a decorative painter, and my job, the work that I did when I was here, I was painting walls and working with an interior designer, pretty basic things while I was studying and learning art. Mm-hmm. But I didn't actually make a product that was something that I would present to a client for a while. So I had, when my children went to school and I was doing some art classes in their school, the parents started asking for me to do commissions of their children. And I was like, oh my God. I knew that I was learning to do people and figures, but I wasn't sure that I could get an exact likeness, especially of a child. So that was the pressure that I would say that I wanted to say yes. I didn't want to miss the opportunity, but the fear and paralysis almost of like, oh my God, if this isn't good, of someone's child. So that kind of fear and second guessing and imposter syndrome of, am I good enough to be able, that was really, really harsh. And the way that I worked through it was just taking more classes and doing kind of a nonstop education, just rituals that I was in classes. And that was before the internet. So I actually was going to classes and studying with people for years and years so that I could feel confident enough that, yes, I can say that I can paint accurately if I want to. And just about the time that became easier for me, I decided, but I don't want to do that.
Then you moved away.
So it's like I want to paint more loosely, I want to paint more abstractly, but I felt I wasn't able to get to that point without really feeling that I had to learn the process. So I did that. And then those situations, though, commission paintings, the days leading up to actually handing it off are some of the most stressful times that I remember. Just fear. But I think that they all worked out. It was mostly in my head. So one of my ways through that has been learning how to handle the self-talk, learning how to, regulate my emotional system while I'm painting and to have a routine. So I would say for the last decade, probably, I've had so much more success with everything that I do because my mental state about it. I'm not the harsh critic that I used to be to myself. And a lot of this came through online. Once Zoom came into process, I started working with people online that were like-minded artists and some coaches and mentors and people who we were all going through the same thing, or we would find someone who was ahead and who had learned those lessons. So I've learned a lot online about the mental and spiritual part of it, of accepting there is no perfect, letting go of perfectionism was a really big thing.
Yeah.
And not comparing to others, which is a little bit harder because of Instagram and social media.
Absolutely, these days,
But that is the work, and I feel that I have more, between the community that I've built with other artists doing similarly what I'm doing and trying to present ourselves and emerge with our work, while you could definitely just close yourself up and say it's too hard, there are too many other people and I just can't do it. But that's not an option for me.
Absolutely.
So I've crossed that line. I'm not giving up. So it's been incredibly fun and rewarding as a result. But the hard times are definitely there. I could write books about them.
Right, yeah. Debra, you've been with us for a long time with Teravarna. Like, I've known you for a pretty long time, I think. I would call it a long time. So how did you hear about Teravarna and what brought you to us, and how did you, start?
The first time I heard about Teravarna was in an email, and it came before Superfine Art Fair, and you were looking for a San Francisco artist or artists who at the last minute might have something to submit to go into Superfine Art Fair. So that was my opportunity to meet you, and I had open studios with my art span is the San Francisco organization that I'm with. So we had our open studios that ended, and I had hoped to be in Superfine or thought about it, but I knew that the timing was super close, and I really had regrets for not. It was like, oh, I would have loved to have done Superfine when they were coming, and I gave a double take at this email that it's like San Francisco artists wanted, without having your own booth, but just to try it, and that was with you. So I was over the moon. That was the happiest moment when my work was accepted, and it's so close. So I just brought it down and met you as you were setting up.
Right. Yeah, I remember that day. Yeah, and then your work was also in a LA art show, right? So that was great.
And then
this one was there.
I remember you said, and we also have work in the LA art show, and that works for me so well. So that was so exciting. So Teravarna has actually given me some of the highlights of my art career for sure.
Okay, thank you. So I was going to say, do you have anything that that you think Teravarna has done well for you, and if not, if something that you think that we should improve on, or if we should attend to something that we're always trying to learn and from the artist and do better. If there's anything that you would like to mention to us, to the camera, we don't mind listening to criticisms. Absolutely. So.
I feel that I've really been blessed by your generosity and your inclusiveness. I'm also really impressed with what you're doing with other artists in the world, that you're providing opportunities for lesser seen artists based on location. I mean, I'm kind of singing your praises all over the place because of that. I think the only thing that is possibly was at the LA Art Show. I felt like there were a lot of us in this space, and I think that was probably because my piece was a little bit big, and you kindly let me bring it anyway. But that was my
No, that was, I think yours was like an afterthought kind of thing going, and like, it was like the way it was would happen. I really wanted to include you, but I couldn't, and there was like a lot of things going on.
And
but
given
this
the
time,
choice,
hopefully for the
I
layout show,
would rather be included.
Yeah,
be a little bit squished in.
Absolutely, I know.
But that was it. No, it has been lovely, like your whole family, and you've been really wonderful to deal with, and it seems like you're really growing. By leaps and bounds since
we hope to include like more people from people who don't get to the art world doesn't know about, but they have like great talents like yourself. Like I know you're pretty people know about you, but I'm still saying like to let more people know about you, and to appreciate, and even in countries which are like overlooked, and there's some great artists, and I'm amazed all the time to see you're doing their work. So is there any last words you have, or?
I mean, I feel so honored that
you asked me here in your beautiful home, overlooking the bay, and it's just I'm sure our viewers will love it when this evening.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you, Debra.
Thank you.